And welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Darren Lundberg.
And I'm Johnny Craddock.
And today we'll be talking about Superman from 1978, directed by Richard Donner, starring Christopher Reeve, Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, Margot Kidder, Ned Beatty, Valerie Perrine, Jackie Cooper, Mark McClure. All-star cast, really, kind of the start of everything. But we wanted to welcome our next special guest, Johnny. It's Mr. Chris Scalzo of the first run and screen run. I want to, he hosts the first run with Matt Howell. And then he also hosts Screen Run with our friend Lady One, who's on for Men in Black. I don't want to say the better half of Screen Run.
Fine.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay, we'll do that. I just didn't know how many people we'd have wanting to lynch us by saying that, because obviously
everybody knows and listens to it. They're listening to for Juan. Absolutely.
That's right. And you're the glue that kind of holds it together and makes sure she. Okay, so all right, so Superman. The reason that I thought of you, Chris, is obviously I listened to Screen Run quite a bit. Like your first season was Kevin Smith. Everybody does. Mm-hmm. Second season was the Alien franchise. Third season was the John Carpenter franchise. So again, I heard you on there. We've listened to you. Obviously, I've been friends with you for a while. Wanted to chat with you. And then Superman, you've mentioned multiple times that this is your comfort movie, or a comfort movie of yours. And so I was like, well, if we're going to talk Superman, I want to be able to talk with Chris. But before we kind of seek into our histories with the movie, if you want to let us know what first run is, what screen run is, anything like that, just give us the 101 on the Scalzo, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I started doing the first run. We just recorded our 699th episode actually today.
Wow.
So we've been doing it for quite a while. It's a lot of fun. Me and my buddy Matt, we do a first run film. And then we'll usually do a second film that's, streaming or something we want to do. We'll do marathons or whatever the case may be. And then we have like a top 5 thing, but we also do a bunch of different games as well. We don't just do top 5s every week. We do different things as well. And then Juan and I do Screen Run, which, like you said, is focused on a certain title, director, theme, series, whatever, where we've started to record season 4.
Okay.
I don't know if I have permission from her to mention what it is yet. But yes, we're recording our 3rd episode, I think Tuesday.
Wow.
And we'll be hopefully pushing that out relatively soon. So it's a little shorter this time out, but we're excited about it and having a lot of fun so far already. So, but yeah, that's, I guess, it. Is that me? That's me. Yeah. That's everything.
That's great. Well, just a couple of blowing smoke up. The first run is very relaxed. It's just you and Matt. You just talk about a movie. You give your opinions. You kind of review it, and it's great. It's just it's honest, right?
Yes.
And then you seek into your your physical media releases of the week, that kind of thing, which is always great, because then you get to give mini reviews of all the other movies that are being released. And so I love hearing all that. And then your top 5s, your games or whatever. It's $6.99. That's great. I mean, it's a relaxed enough show, I think, that it feels, congrats on going for so long, but it's it sounds like they have a fun enough time that I don't know, I don't want to call it easy, but would you call it easy getting this far?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It helps that Matt and I are friends, and it's just this is going to sound weird. I moved down to Florida about 8 years ago. I'm from Connecticut originally. It was Mrs. First Run, got a job down here, and it's my connection back north as well. So it's my way to kind of reconnect with him and some friends and all that too. So it's very relaxed, very easy. Like the editing we have to do is minimal. We've been doing it so long. It just kind of knock it out. It's never an issue. So it's a lot of fun.
We have that in common, Darren. I moved away, and this is kind of my connection to you. So that's kind of how we stayed connected when I moved away. So yeah.
So I did want to say before we begin, I had some concerns.
Okay.
So I listened to a few of your shows because doing the 2 shows and then regular life and stuff, I don't get to enjoy other people's shows as much. I'm like, before, I know I'd been with Darren, I had a lot of fun talking with him, so that was great. So let me see what I'm getting into. So I pulled on it. Here's what I run down. Labyrinth, number 1.
Here we go.
Johnny. David Bowie is my favorite musician of all time. You would not believe the amount of Bowie memorabilia, albums. I have everything the man's ever put out, everything he hasn't put out. Right? I mean, that's how I am. It's so listening to that episode pained me. I know I'm gonna Darren ask because you weren't as anti Bowie as he was, but still, not that you weren't virulently like, my God, I'm glad he's dead. I appreciate that. But that was
Might
troubling.
as well.
And then I jumped to one of my other favorite films. So I Married an Axe Murderer. And I'm thinking, maybe I'm supposed to be friends with your wife. Maybe that's what's supposed to be happening. Because
Sure.
I'm simpatico with her on that as well.
Yep, yep.
And then what did I do? Crimson Tide. Because that's a film I adore as well. So that was a lot of fun to listen to. But man, listening to that Bowie stuff was
What did I
difficult.
say?
I'm
not
like, do I
sure
still
what
want to do this?
I don't remember what I said.
It was this close to. I'm glad he's dead. Like I thought he. I think it was something like he. I thought he was dead like years ago. I think something.
Oh, it
like
wasn't.
that.
It wasn't that bad. I was.
No,
I was,
no, it was never a fan. I don't get it. I never got it. The people's affection. It is. I am a failed illustrator. I went to art school, so and Bowie was. He's God. How does he describe it? It always worked for me. Just as the way when you listen to him, he has a unique way of making you feel heard and represented in a way that a lot of musicians maybe can't. Just the different artsy kind of people. He really captures that. So I connected with him as a kid with Let's Dance, Modern Love, China Girl, and I picked up a Greatest Hits, the Reiko Changes disc. And then I was so let me listen to all the songs. And I loved every single song. And then from there, I just started buying all the albums. I'm in art school. I'm trying to be an illustrator as well. All this stuff, and I just fell in love. And it's never looked back. And it pained me a little bit to hear your words, but that's fine. I thought we'd march on. So.
Yeah, I should have remembered before I invited. I should have listened to that episode again. And then when you talked about all the Bowie albums you collect, I was like, oh no, he's not going to like that Labyrinth episode. I hope he skipped that. I guess.
Oh no, the first thing I went to, number one, went right to it.
I can't explain it. I don't know what it is. I just, like I say, I never.
You're a musician too, right?
I am. I do. Yeah. Drums, guitar, piano. I sing. So I'm not going to say he's not talented. I think he has talent. I just never had that, like, I don't know. It never hit me on any kind of level. It was always, I was more into the heavy metal scene. So the David Bowie stuff didn't really jive with me.
Fair enough. I'll confess, I never got into the heavy metal stuff as much. So I like punk, but never so much. Yeah. Fair enough.
We can still be friends though, right? I mean, nothing's been said like to really drive that.
I'm going to see how this goes.
Okay.
And then by the end of the episode, I will give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Okay. Well, I'm glad Bowie didn't do any of the songs for this movie.
That's
so. All right. Yeah. Wow. I can't believe I should have had a trigger warning on this. I'm sorry about
that's
that.
All right. We'll get past it.
All right. Okay. So anyway, so you've got the first run. You've obviously got the screen run with the later one, which we're already big fans of, and so we had, like I said, we had a run for Men in Black, another comic book movie. So with Superman, if we wanted to kind of go over our histories with it, like you said, Chris, I'm interested in, because you said that you put it on just, again, as a comfort kind of thing, just to have. So what's been your experience with the movie, and why is it a comfort movie for you? If I'm getting the quote correctly, why is it a comfort movie for you?
No, absolutely. It's my youth. I was born in 75, came out in 78. I didn't see it until the TV version first, right? And I don't know. I always loved superheroes. I always loved comic books. I was a big comic book guy for a long time. And I've always just one of the things I think we'll talk about is just and why we can't seem to get him right nowadays for some reason. We'll see what Gunn does. Is the earnestness of the character, the truth and justice and all that stuff, right? The mythical version of America as being, the American way. Maybe not the literal, but the thing we like to hold ourselves up to think we are. And it is just the purity of it. And part of it, I confess, is John Williams' score. A lot of it, I think we'll talk about as well, as Christopher Reeve's performance. The way he embodies that character I think the core of it, coming back to the title of your show, is just the nostalgia factor. It reminds me of a time when life was simpler and easier, and I could, crawl up in a couch underneath a blanket, and my mom and dad were there, and everything was okay with the world, type of a thing.
Yeah,
I think that's really the core of it.
Okay. All right. So, Johnny, what about you? What's been your experience with the movie?
Well, I don't have a lot of history with the character. I'm not a big comic book guy. I mean, I did read Batman here and there, but never much with anything else. But this is a movie that was always on in my household. We always watched it. It was always on at family get-togethers, reunions. It was something we watched, with our cousins, and their friends, and it was just something that I grew up with that I knew very well. But I never had, like with David Bowie, never had that connection. You know what I mean? It was just something that was there. It was on. I enjoyed it. I never had any problem with it. But we'll talk about it a little more, I think. But when I watched it again for this episode, again, it didn't really hit. I was like, oh no, this is there. I found like issues here and there, and we'll talk about Marlon Brando probably a little bit later. But I thought he fell short. I thought Ned Beatty fell short. A lot of little things, but with Christopher Reeve, I think nobody has done Superman like he has. I don't think anybody ever will. And I think we'll talk about it more, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good. I like it. I remembered it from my youth. I liked it back then. I still can enjoy it, but it's just something that I think this time around didn't quite hit home with me.
Okay. Well, I think it's the subjectivity of it, right? Like if you have to really sit down and apply yourself to something instead of just having it on in the background, you have to involve yourself. And that's how it was. Chris, we talk a lot on this show about how like Jaws was the movie that introduced me to movies. That's the wonder of movies. Like, why is this movie scaring me? Why am I involved with the Brody character? Why, do I identify with so much of this, and why is it working and for me? And that's when I started diving in and studying direction and story and things like that and aesthetics. And Superman was the next movie that I became obsessed with. It was Richard Donner was the next director after Spielberg that I was like, who's this? Who directed this? And I started learning about him and his style and everything. And so, and I wasn't huge into comics. I've never been a giant comic book fan or a reader, but I do read them. I have read them. There are times when I did go long stretches reading them, things like that. So I was familiar with the characters, but watching this movie, like you said, Chris, the first time I watched it, I think was on that ABC Sunday movie night. I think that's when they debuted it, and they stretched it across 2 nights.
They popped that sucker to 3 hours for that too.
Yeah, because they added all the extra footage and things like that to kind of stretch it across. And so I remember recording that and watching it obsessively. And the shot where young Clark, Jeff East, goes to the north or whatever, and the Fortress of Solitude comes out, and he learns from Jor-El and everything, and it has that whole mystical thing where they're traveling through space. It's over the 11, 12 years or whatever that they've been out there, and then it's that shot that you see of Christopher Reeve in the background, and when the John Williams theme hits and he takes off and he soars toward that camera and he banks it right in front. And at that moment, I just thought movies could do anything. The first time I saw it, I was like, how is he flying? Like, I completely bought it wasn't a special effect. It wasn't like an optical thing. It wasn't like a dummy. That was actually Superman flying past the camera. And I was like, what just happened? And from that moment on, I've just been in love with the idea of movies. So if Jaws was the one that introduced me to what movies, the magic of them, I think Superman is a movie that kind of solidified that magic for me. So it has been huge for me as a kid. Jonny, you watching it kind of on in the background, that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's not something that you plaster yourself in front of and you wear the tape to the nub and everything. It's just something that, my family's enjoying it, it's on. It's just part of your regular life. So I think it all depends on how you approach this material. And it is interesting watching people that have never seen the movie that are watching it today after watching like the Snyder movies or anything like that, just to see the reaction of that. But yeah, again, it's a huge connection for me. I think we mentioned that a couple times because we did cover Lady Hawk before. I did talk about Lethal Weapon on the Cheap Seat Reviews podcast. I think Sean has been a guest on ScreenRun in the past anyway. So I talked with them about Richard Donner. So yeah, Richard Donner means a lot. And I don't know, like, what do you guys think of the direction of this? I think Richard Donner is kind of a chameleon. I don't know if he has what I'd call a personality. Like, I don't know if you can tell it's a Richard Donner movie, but the way he just sinks into every genre, I think he just absorbs what the genre is and he just attacks it from the appropriate perspective. Chris, what do you think about Donner and all of that?
I think he is just a classic Hollywood kind of workman director. He still has, there's always kind of an air. I think he doesn't have the wonder that like a Spielberg does, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you look at the work. I mean, Goonies, Lethal Weapon, a massive success. Maverick is, I think, a fantastic film as well from the 90s.
Like that one, right?
but he's still able to, how do I describe this? It's like a workman's like version of Spielberg for me. It's a more traditional Hollywood director kind of delivering the wonder, if you will, maybe not to the magic levels of Steven Spielberg, but still very just, you're right. I'm struggling with this because I think you're right. He doesn't have like an instantly recognizable, I don't think, style per se. Like when I was listening to your Crimson Tide, like a Tony Scott clearly did for a lion's share of his films. Soderbergh as well. I know a Steven Soderbergh film the minute it starts, type of a thing, right? But I know he's going to deliver you an exceptionally competent, entertaining, and engaging film. That's just his hallmark.
Competent, I think, is a great word for that. Johnny, what did you think of the direction of the movie?
I thought it was fine. I didn't really take notice of Richard Donner until Lethal Weapon, so I didn't know it was him when I was a kid watching Superman. But looking back, I mean, you can tell he's good. He knows what he's doing. He's proficient. Like you say, he's competent. But like we talked about with Rob Reiner, there's no like stamp on his work really. Like like you mentioned, Soderbergh. Another one is we talked about before is Scorsese, John Woo. These guys they have a vision for their movies, and you can tell when it's their movie. Really, you can't really tell when it's a Donner movie, but I will say, I love Lethal Weapon. I love what he's done since then. And Superman's fine. It's well directed.
I guess what we want to say is he's very respectful of any material that he tackles, right?
Yeah.
Except for maybe Lady Hawk, which the score doesn't really match. He was just trying something new, and but other than that, anything that he does, if it's a Western, he's going to direct it like a Western. If it's a superhero movie, and what was the magic of this movie is that word that he had for the whole production, which is verisimilitude. I'm getting that wrong. It's Marvel, but verisimilitude, is that how you pronounce that? Where it's just the sincerity of the thing, the earnest, you buy into the emotional core of it. And I think that's true of not just Superman, but of all of his movies. I think if there's a stamp, that's it. There's just no discernible kind of style that you notice, because like I said, he becomes the genre instead of the genre becoming him, like most movies.
Exactly. He's able to weave in and throughout the genres, just like why am I blanking? Holy cow. Friedkin's, I think, another example of that.
Right.
I think so. Donner did The Omen, right?
Right.
A fantastic horror film. And he goes that to a fantasy superhero film. Then he goes to kind of another fantasy, well, I mean, Goonies is a classic. The Toy is troublesome to say the least at this point. It was a different time.
Yeah.
Scrooged, fantastic film. One of my favorite Christmas movies, right? He's just one of those guys, like you said, he just weaves in and out of these genres to deliver just entertaining films. He's a reliable guy. You're going to get.
Right. Yeah. So kind of seeking like sincerity and everything. I think the glue so Donner's fine, the supporting cast is fine, the script, which obviously was written by Puzo at first, which we talked about with The Godfather, which is not, from the sound of it, was not very respectful of the material. It was more of like a campy kind of thing, like a 500-page kind of joking thing. And so when Donner brought in Tom Mankiewicz, to kind of do a rewrite, they kind of brought it all back to the mythic qualities and being respectful to the Americana. I think Donner says that Superman is American is like apple pie or baseball. So you don't want to mess with that, right? The Salkinds just saw, I think, the potential, like the financial potential of it. And they didn't know, let's just get it on the screen. It doesn't matter. We've got Puzo, we've got Brando. It doesn't matter what's in the movie as long as we have the movie. It's what it felt like. But the glue that sells this movie, if it wasn't for Christopher Reeve, I don't know if this movie would work at all. Because you have the special effects, which they broke some new ground. I think Zoptics is a word that was created with this movie, where who is the name of Zoran Perisic was the special effects guy, where he's able to take the front projection and he attached the zoom lens to the camera and the projector, so they kind of zoomed in sync with each other. So it made the flying sequences look realistic or better than we'd seen before. But today, even though the special effects are dated, even though some of the comedy is dated, I think Reeves's like commitment to that part. And again, Johnny, you hit it on the head. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to, because what's the cliche? The special effect of the movie is after his flying sequence with Lois, and he comes in through the door, and he's Clark. But then there's a moment where he takes off his glasses and he straightens up, and it's like he grows by like 2 feet. And I'm not kidding you. Like, it's fantastic. He goes, how did he do that? But it's all because I think he knew that character inside and out. Chris, what do you like? Reeve, do you agree with that? Is he the glue that makes this work, or what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And that is a fantastic scene that really shows you Reeves' range and what he's able to do with the character. And I will give Johnny some props in regards to his concerns or the critiques of the film, because that scene before that, when they're flying together, and then Lois has her internal poem monologue.
Yeah.
I think I hate it. It is really just one of the most cringe inducing scenes I think in the history of cinema. I really have a disdain for that moment. But Reeves, you're right. The film doesn't work with him. You look at all the people who are I guess the studio initially wanted what Redford and Burt Reynolds at one point. Stallone thought about it, but
Oh, boy.
and Paul Newman was offered Superman or Lex. I can't. It's just, you look at all these big names. You needed to go with somebody lesser known, which is smart. But exactly, the aw shucks, I'm just a regular old guy, from Iowa or Kansas, I guess, right? You're supposed to be Kansas, not Iowa. What the hell's wrong with me? Captain Kirk's from Iowa. I'm conflating my classic lead character archetypes. But yeah, no, you're entirely right. It's the whole film, I think, hangs on Reeves, and he absolutely knocks it out of the park for sure.
Yeah. Johnny, anything to add to that?
Well, I have a question. Was Clark Kent always that kind of bumbly in the comic books, or was he more? Because I didn't read the comics as much as you guys did, but wasn't he? He wasn't always that bumbly of a character, was he?
Chris, what do you think? What is your take?
I mean, it depends on how far you want to go back, right? The version I grew up with for the most part was probably John Byrne's Man of Steel, and there was I think a level to that. But if you go back to the old stuff, he's more of a competent reporter, and not so much like a yokel, from Kansas type of a thing, But he always had this more of a innocence kind of babe in the woods kind of feel to him, as far as back as I can remember, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the way he plays the Clark Kent character, but like because he's such an idiot as Clark Kent, you think he wouldn't keep his job very long. You know what I mean? So like I was like, how is he still employed? Because he just gets everything wrong. But
Well, the inner workings of the Daily Planet, they don't really dive into that. I think one of the weaknesses, if you want to call it, of the movie is some of it, they just expect you to accept some of the stuff. Like you mild-mannered reporter, he works for the Daily Planet. We don't know, we don't get really ins and outs of the reporting or what the day-to-day kind of struggles are in that newsroom or whatever. We do get a bunch of flavors from Perry White and things like that, Jimmy Olsen. We get a lot of that from the comics. Like if you read the comics, you'd remember that. And that's kind of what you'd look for. I don't know. Chris, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, sure. I mean, he gets the city beat. He's supposedly the fastest typist Perry's ever seen.
Great line.
He has a really snappy prose, right? I think it's how he describes it as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they don't dive into the inner workings, the politics and stuff of the newsroom. I'm not that concerned about that. He needs, the reason why he gets that job is he can be up on the news and see what's going on at all times. It gives him the ability to travel as well.
Yeah.
And kind of have his finger on the pulse of everything that's happening. And if he needs to rush out, well, there's a big story, I got to go cover it, and that gives him cover, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of the whole impetus behind that whole job.
So I think Reeve modeled his performance after Cary Grant in Bringing Up Baby, kind of that bumbling, or his performance as Clark Kent anyway. So yeah, I mean, he's bumbling. I think it's a way that nobody would suspect that he's Superman, that kind of thing. Lois is obviously, it's strange that she's just the air that he puts on. She's not even, she barely like recognizes that he exists, right? But Superman, she's absolutely gaga for. And it's just, I don't know, like you watch Cable, you watch especially Dean Cain and Lois and Clark, which I don't think there is any, he played Superman and Clark Kent exactly the same. So I always thought that was kind of, it wasn't fun. And Cable, you never get to see him really as Clark, because he's just as serious as Clark is as Superman, just with glasses, it seems like.
I feel so bad for Cable.
Yeah.
I really think he could have done a great job with that role, but he was he never got a Superman movie. He never got one.
Well, I think the difference is like Cable is suited, I think, for material like this. He's a charmer. He's got charisma. If you watch him in Man from U.N.C.L.E., if you watch him in Mission Impossible, like he's got chops. And just to see, and there's flashes of it in as is Superman, but the character is just not written that way. The character is written as being some kind of realistic kind of, I don't want to call him a grump, but it's like how we would kind of view him. There's no, in those movies, there's really no room for fun. And I think that's a big thing that's missing from a lot of comic book movies these days, is that Superman gets the fun down. It has a lot of those, the dialogue. Jackie Cooper gets some great ones, right? And you know, when he's talking later about, talk to him, the suit, is it plastic, is it silk, you know, it's so funny. A lot, there's so much life to this, to especially that third segment, because this movie is what it's split into basically 3 different movements, I like to call them, or one's super serious and Shakespearean, the next one's normal, Norman Rockwellish, and then this one's like the, you know, the His Girl Friday. It's just the snappy, like I said, the prose style. It's just like a romantic comedy, that kind of thing. So there's 3 different kind of feels to it. But I think Reeve, as Superman, he never treats him as a joke. You know what I mean? He always treats him with this inner life and this inner sincerity, and he's awesome when he's saving people, like that whole climax where he's just rushing around, like pushing boulders over and saving people from floods and keeping that bus from toppling over the side of the bridge. And he's like, but he's very, you know, he's geeky with Lois when he saves her from that helicopter. And he says to her, like, just, I hope this doesn't put you off flying, miss. You know, technically speaking, it's still the safest way to travel. And there's a shot where he turns around and he's grinning like an idiot, because he knows that he's impressing her, even though he's being a giant dork. You know what I mean? It's just, he just sells every moment right. And even, I don't know, like this movie, when it came out, comic books were kind of thought of as nonsense. And a lot of the critics, because of the way that this movie treats the sincerity of it and the earnestness, I think critics were like, what is this? Like, why are you treating this with such seriousness? This doesn't deserve that kind of material. You know what I'm talking about? So I don't know. What does everybody agree with that? Is it just the time? And is Superman kind of groundbreaking for the way that it treated the character and the material? Chris, what do you think?
Oh, okay. I feel like Johnny's been screwed over here time wise. I don't want to take up all of this stuff on a show.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. One of the reasons why the film is so successful is it does take the character seriously instead of being a goofball or ridiculous or a whole big kind of farcical thing. This is not Batman 66.
Yeah.
Right? This is not Adam West's Batman. This is a different thing. And I think it showed that you can take these characters seriously and have an entertaining big. I mean, it's still, listen, at its core, it's still a kid's movie. It is.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But yeah, I agree entirely. By not treating it all as a joke and adding an air of seriousness to it, outside of the Lois monologue, but still, the rest of it, still, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some things with the film that I just don't think works, and we can talk about that. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the TV version, but it is, it clocks in at about 3 hours, and they just released it physically like 2 years ago on physical media. It was like traded for the longest time online, or really VHS copies of people who had recorded it like you had done. There's a lot of stuff in that VHS. Is like my favorite bit. I know I'm going a little off script, and I apologize here. Is during the earthquake scene, the Hollywood sign actually falls and is going to trample a bunch of Girl Scouts. But when he does the reverse time thing, the sign goes back up, and it's just a very funny and weird visual. It made me laugh out loud. There's a lot of that bit too throughout the whole thing when he does that expanded time thing, reverses all of that stuff, and it's just a weird, funny thing to watch. Yeah. But I don't know. I'm sorry, Johnny. I'm digressing. What are your thoughts about the treating the character seriously instead of a campy run there?
Yeah, well, I never saw the serials. I didn't really watch those, so I don't really know.
Are you familiar with the Fleischer cartoons?
Oh yeah.
Okay, those are
yeah
probably my favorite animation of all time. I think they're gorgeous to watch. Sorry, go ahead, continue.
No, that's fine. You did, Darren. You did say it. You brought up the word campy, and that's what I would say. This is. That's what it reminds me of. Kind of like a campy movie. And I guess because it is based on a comic book, but I appreciate the seriousness of it, because for me, I was big into Batman. I liked the way that character was treated, as far as Michael Keaton, and then like Christopher Nolan obviously took it to another level. And those ones they're so serious and they're so realistic for me. Then comparing that to a Superman movie where you have this character who can pretty much do anything and nothing. You know what I mean? That was always hard for me because it wasn't realistic for me. But I appreciate how they treated it. And man, Christopher Reeve's performance is just amazing. Here's what I will say: I really, really enjoy the Christopher Reeve and the Gene Hackman, because you have these two A-list actors who treat the material as something that's not campy or not comic booky. And so when they come on screen, it kind of elevates it. But when you see Ned Beatty treat it like a cartoon, or like when you see someone like Margot Robbie, I don't think she's that. Not who is it? Not Kidder.
Kidder.
Yeah.
Margot. Yeah.
I don't think they did their characters justice. I don't know. So when they're on screen, I wasn't really into it. But watching Christopher Reeve and watching Gene Hackman and watching them take that material to another level that's when it kind of like became exciting for me. And I was like, oh, this is good. But then again, you get Ned Beatty walking on screen. And it's like, oh my gosh, when can he please just leave? Like anyway. But yeah, overall, I still appreciate it.
There's never a moment in this movie where you're not aware that it's a comic book movie. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like Christopher Nolan during Batman's, he's making them so that you forget you're watching a comic book movie. And there's a drama and like an emotionality to those movies that sells that. So you can think, oh, this could happen. And I think that was the goal they're shooting for. This is like, it exists in a different, like, it never forgets that it's a comic book movie. But again, there's sincerity and earnestness here. I'm going to keep using those words, that just, it's underlining that whole thing. And every time you think it goes too campy, you always have something that brings it back. You're like, oh, this is grounding me and this has helped. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe you guys feel a little bit different, but I definitely feel like there's enough here. Like we talked about, it's flawed. There's a bunch of things that don't work, even though they're trying and throwing things at the wall to see if they work, which I do appreciate. But there's that underlying kind of Christopher Reeve, especially, and Gene Hackman, and they kind of sell that. But I guess we kind of want to, I want to mention Marlon Brando here because we talked about him twice, obviously, this season. Chris, what do you think of Marlon Brando in this? He created, I guess, the method acting thing. Like that's what he was renowned for. One of the greatest actors of his generation. I don't know. I think maybe there was a moment where he just started thinking he was an icon, and he just kind of leaned too heavily on that instead of like acting. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah. So I think there's a weird thing sometimes with people with Brando, that they more familiar with his later work and they haven't seen like, On the Waterfront or Streetcar or something, like when the guy, he's electric in those films. I mean, it's incredible. And Brando, I mean, is there an air of him potentially phoning it in as he's cashing his gigantic checks? Sure, I think so. I think they hired him to give the film a little gravitas as well. This kind of show, hey, listen, we're serious. We're making a Superman film for everybody. This is not a kiddie movie. This is for, there's going to be here something for everybody as well. Look, I got Brando in this damn thing. All right. So I think, yes, I think I still enjoy him in this, but there is an air of him phoning it in for sure. And I would say too, I would push a little bit back on Beatty. I love how big his performance is in this film. I don't know what it is. I agree with you that Reeves is the tent pole. He holds the whole thing up. Hackman is right there next to him. Gene Hackman's one of my favorite actors of all time. I've loved him in everything he's ever done. And but there's something about Beatty's over the top, outsized Mitteluthor performance that I don't know what it is, but I've always liked it, and I've actually grown to appreciate it more as I've gotten older. It's weird because there's things about it that I loved as a kid that I didn't get. Like I didn't get as a kid how horny that interview scene is between the two of them. But I didn't like Ned Beatty, or I thought, oh, Luther's okay, But then as I get older and I see things, your perspective changes, and I appreciate things more and more. And one of those is Beatty's performance. I do have a weird thing about Brando saying Krypton every time, but that's fine. I'm going to let that slide too. It's Brando.
Well, the obviously the controversy is he kind of showed up on set and he had arguments with Donner about, well, I think I want to play him as a giant green bagel, and kind of testing him and that stuff like that. But he would put, like, I was watching a making of earlier this week, and my wife was sitting here when they're talking about Brando, and she's like, "Is Brando a good actor?" Like you said, Chris, she hadn't seen him in a lot of things, and I was like, well, he was fantastic in the earlier films. He did make a dent. He was making movies that were just and giving performances that were next level. But
Mhm.
it's like, you watch him and it's like, is that laziness? Like him just having cue cards around, and he says that it's because it makes it more spontaneous, or did he just give up? We talked about with Apocalypse Now how he showed up on set like a month and a half late. He was 300 pounds, is way overweight. He hadn't read the book, hadn't done any research. Dennis Hopper obviously had grown up loving Marlon Brando, and so just to meet one of your heroes, and I guess one of their first times together, Brando screamed at him for like, you can't tell me what to do. You're just a know nothing kid, that kind of thing. So it's
Yeah.
kind of weird, like meeting your idol and having that happen. It's he has a presence in this movie as Jarrell, and I like that he's only in it for a little bit in the beginning, kind of set it up. And I think he works for that Shakespearean quality of that first segment. He wouldn't obviously work like later on when they kind of bring him back, in New York and that, or Metropolis, that kind of thing. But for that first segment, I think he works. It's just he feels more like a presence than he does actually giving a good performance. Johnny, what do you think?
Well, I mean, they gave him top billing, so
Of course.
um, I mean, he does fine as that role, but again, he's not in it very long. So what really can you do with it? Like, there's really not much more you can do than just kind of, read the cue cards, and so I don't know. I mean, I don't think he deserves top billing, and I don't think I think he could have done better. But then again, like I say, it's a smaller part. He's not in it very long, so I don't know. He was fine.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about selling the movie, so I guess you have to sell it on Brando and Hackman as opposed to Reeve, who was a soap opera actor, right? Chris, did you have anything to add on that?
Nope, just it's like Nicholson had top billing over Keaton in Batman '89 too, right? It's just a bigger star at that
Yeah.
time for sure. So, but no, in regards to the rest of the performances and the crew and everybody else, no, I think that's it. Though I would quibble probably a bit with Brando and Apocalypse Now. I actually really like him in that, but I wanted to say as Glenn Ford as
Yes.
Jonathan Kent. It's probably my favorite performance of Jonathan Kent in any of the films.
Hmm.
Just that moment alone when he has his heart attack and the way he delivers that, oh no, and then
Yeah,
collapses. It breaks my heart every time. There's a few scenes like that in this film to this day that I get goosebumps still when it happens. There's that scene. There's the scene when Clark wakes up at dawn and there's the little radio static, and it's like, what is it, like an Edward Hopper almost painting out through the window
Yeah.
as the light starts to come over. I'm actually getting a chill, like goosebumps, just talking about it right now. I mean, there's lots of little moments that the film's filled with that for me. So yeah, I wanted to make sure I hit that Glenn Ford thing too. Just the whole you're here for a reason clip, right? It's just wonderful.
Well, that's the thing. There are moments of quiet in this movie that I don't think you'd be able to get away with in comic book movies now. I mean, you compare the Man of Steel sequence where Pa Kent is killed, and again, he dies in a giant freaking tornado. Like that's the kind of the attention span that I think a lot of audiences have these days. In here, it's just I call it like Chekhov's heart attack, because they mentioned earlier, like,
Yeah.
Jonathan, you got to watch out for your heart. And when he runs, and again, he just clasps, we know what's going on. And like I had that as a note. I'm like, that oh no is so shattering. And he falls, and it cuts to a wide shot. And Martha and Clark haven't noticed. It takes Martha looking over because she hears the dog barking. And just that, the way it sees from that, and Clark runs out and he says dad, and you see them run to him in that long shot, and then it cuts to like the sweeping camera in the cemetery, and that crisis of conscience where Clark is like, all those powers, I couldn't save him. Like, and I think really gets to the heart of what this movie's about, is that why Superman can't save everybody, and why he's drawn and to save people, because he wants to save as many people as he can. But I just think that again, we come back to that sincerity, that quiet. Those are the scenes that just nail everything and make and pull you in. Johnny, did you have any thoughts about that? I saw you reacting, but what about that scene stood up
I
to you?
agree. I think that was a great delivery, and yeah, it's a very heart wrenching scene. Yeah, I just agree with that what you guys said.
The romance too. I know that maybe we can quibble with Margot Kidder's performance, but again, it's got that old Hollywood kind of romance back and forth, that kind of thing when they're scenes together. I think that their love story works well enough that again, that's the heart of the movie. Superman sees Lois, and that's what he recognizes in humanity, why he loves it, and she kind of embodies that. There's an innocence to her, even though she's kind of hard boiled on the surface. But regardless of what we think of Margot Kidder's performance, when she's being buried, the note I had is, did they actually try to kill Margot Kidder on set? Because they are burying her in like mounds of dirt, right? But the fact that Superman is saving everybody, and we see these things when the person that matters the most, he doesn't know these people that he's saving. They're all strangers, but he's doing it because he's Superman. And the one person that he does care about is dying, and we're seeing it. And the part where he realizes it and he pulls her out. And again, that giant moment of quiet where he's just with her body. And you can feel him break. Like he's done all this good, but he can't save the people that I'm getting chills thinking about that scene, because that's the whole movie. It's like he couldn't save his dad. Now this is happening, and he won't stand for it. So that scream that he gives, again, he sells every moment. I don't know that, you know what I mean? Like if it wasn't for something in Kidder's performance, something in the writing, I don't think that moment would sell as much as it does.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is more Reeve, for sure, Christopher Reeves. But I've always, I hate to jump away from the performance, but I've always struggled with that. Part of it is the ending when he goes really super fast and changes the spin of the Earth. I mean, never mind the catastrophic impact to the planet that something like that would cause. But I mean, just the reversing of time itself. Now, I had a discussion with somebody about this a while ago. They were talking about it. Is he reversing time, or is he traveling back in time and then like stopping the stuff from happening instead? Or like it's weird. I'm never quite understand. And the thing I hate about the Donner cut in Superman 2, if you've seen it, is that he does the same thing.
Yeah.
They repeat that. One of my least favorite things about it. And I don't know. It's just it's one of the things that has always bothered me about the film. As I loved it as a kid, but as one of those things that switched for me as I got older, where I don't care for it now as much at all. Because everything gets undone. Everything. And in a weird way, everything he did is undone as well. And it's like, well, what was the point? And then I don't know how many times we get Brando's voiceover saying, "You are forbidden to interfere with history. You are forbidden."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he does it. And then there's no impact because there's no negative impact for that unless you go to Superman 2, the Donner cut, because by him, but no, it's not the reversal that does it. It's him pushing the missile into space is what frees them in the Phantom Zone in the Donner cut. So there's no impact. So I never understood that. You're forbidden from changing history, but if you do it, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
Right.
And I never understood that. I've never understood that. Do you guys have any thoughts on? It's bothered me my whole life.
Yeah, I've got a note on that. Johnny, what did you think about that, the turning back the world sequence?
Well, yeah, that was one of my big questions when I was a kid and now. It was like, why, he's not supposed to do it, but he does it. And then, like you say, nothing happens. It's always been a question of mine.
Yeah, it's weird. It's something that have spent how many years, decades, 40 years just trying to make sense of what that actually, I get what he's doing with Lois, but you're right. By turning back time, it's like, how is he doing it? Like, what's the logistics of that? Famously, obviously, is they shot this movie back to back with Superman 2, and the turning back the world was supposed to be the ending of the second one, and they just decided, well, we need a more spectacular ending. Let's stop making Superman 2 because we're so over budget. Let's just finish Superman 1. How are we going to make this ending bigger? Let's move that turning back the world thing, and we'll get to it because I wanted to talk about the sequels. Obviously, they didn't have a plan for that. The Donner cut is not a movie for me. It's like a glimpse into what could have been. It's not an actual movie. And we'll talk about why in a little bit, even though I think that you get the glimpse of what Superman 2 could have been as opposed to what we got. But by turning back the world again, I just don't think in that movie it was just because they didn't have anything else. That was originally how it was supposed to be. And so when that movie appeared,
what the original ending of Superman was supposed to be? It occurs to me then that I have no idea what it was supposed to be.
He's able to save Lois. he's able to get to her in time. He pulls her out. I think Mankiewicz says in the commentary that he had a line of, "I'll flip you for whoever gets to take the car to Hertz." Right? They ended on a joke, and then it cuts to I think it cuts to the missile in space, and it frees the Kryptonian villains, and they break out of the Phantom Zone. They say "free," and that's how it ends. So it didn't have a spectacular climax. It just kind of ended because they had it as a two-part. That's from what I understand.
Now, can I say a quick thing too about my girl Ursa?
Yeah.
Supposedly her perversions and reasoning and unreasoning hatred of all mankind threaten even the children of Krypton.
Krypton.
I think I could fix her.
You think so?
I think so.
You think if you were with her and could form a relationship, you think you could basically bring her down to earth and make it work?
Maybe.
Okay.
I think so. I wonder. I've always had a weird thing for women with short hair, and I'm wondering now if that's where it started.
Probably.
I never thought about it. I always thought it was Sabrina from Charlie's Angels, Kate Jackson, but maybe Ursa was part of that.
It's Sarah Douglas. It's the Sarah Douglas effect. Johnny, what did you have anything you wanted to add
About the villains or
about anything? It looked like you had something you wanted to.
My wife has short hair, so.
There you
go. There you go.
Another reason why Chris should be friends with her, not you. So, but yeah, I mean, the ending is problematic. I think it brings it back again because you have the sincerity of him bringing Lex and Otis to prison, and then obviously that last shot, which I got to tell you, the shot where Reeve smiles at the camera, I used to hide from that as a kid because it just embarrassed me at how fuzzy it made me feel, I guess you could say. But like watching it now, we talked about all the problems that the movie has, and I think, like I said before, Reeve is the guy that sells it when he smiles at the camera in the end, and you believe in Superman himself as a character. You know what I mean? Because you believe in that, and that last shot, it kind of sends you out on a high of, I know this guy. I know this Superman, and I feel good about the Superman that he's, and we get a feel for what he is and what he's all about. I don't know. What did you guys think of that ending? At the last shot, actually. Chris, if you want to go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's great. I mean, it's archetypal. It's him. It's seeing Superman flying over the earth as the sun breaks behind him. It's just, and he smiles and then kind of peers off, and then the credits kind of roll. I think they've done that shot basically in every Superman film at some point as well.
Yeah.
And it's just an iconic moment. Just the Earth's protector, and he's just, he's still, he's just a good guy. He's just a good guy and enjoying his life, and yeah, and that's fantastic.
All right, Johnny, what about you? What do you think of that last? Does the movie sell? Does it get to the point where that movie sells it for you?
I think it does, and it's never bothered me, the smile. I appreciate it. I like Chris says, that's iconic, and I think it's a great way to end the movie.
Okay, good. So, we talked about like the sincerity. Obviously, we talked about well, just to mention some of the filmmaking in here. I know that we're before we see on our next topic, but some of the sequences, watching it again like this week, are still wows it to me. Like the whole helicopter saving sequence. It's a mix of rear projection. It's a mix of real sets. It's a mix of model work. It's a mix of back project. It's a mix of everything, and sound and music. And I think there's just I use this word a lot, symphonic. It just kind of reaches a peak, and you're like, whoa, it's everything working together to create this real moment of magic. You have that shot later after the notorious "Can you read my mind" sequence, where they land back on Lois's balcony, and she says goodbye to Superman, who takes off in the background. Lois kind of walks over and she's like, "What is Superman?" And then it's Clark knocking on the door. And as a kid, I was like, how did he change so fast? Because it looks so, but then you watch it now. Obviously, they use the rear projection that Superman taking off was filmed before, and it's just her in front of the screen. And then when she crosses in front of the tree, it becomes the actual set. But again, it's moments like that absolutely sell the movie, as janky as some of the effects may be. And I think the blue screen effects of Superman flying, even though they look janky, I'd still take those any day over like the fake CG characters flying, because at least I believe that it's Christopher Reeve flying. Does that make sense? It's just,
yeah,
I don't know, Chris, and then we'll talk to Johnny too. Is like, what do you think? Does those little moments, or is there a moment that sells the jankiness or makes you kind of look past it? Because again, all the sincerity here really just kind of helps me zoom past it.
That helicopter Lois rescue scene it's a stop what I'm doing moment. So if I have that film on in the background, whatever I'm doing, In fact, it happened when I rewatched the TV version because I have not watched it, and I don't know. I bought the damn Blu-ray like a year or two ago when it came out, and I still hadn't watched it. And I'm like, well, I've watched the new 4K release.
Hmm.
Let me watch the TV version for this. And again, I think I don't know what it was. I don't know, I was prepping something to eat, and then that scene started. I stopped, walked over, sat right in front of my television, and watched the whole thing. When he comes out, goes to the phone booth. It's the little half phone booth for
Yeah.
the kids who may not know. He actually used to have like set phones on the street where you could actually call people. But then he has to go through the revolving door instead, and that guy says bad outfit, all that stuff. But that scene when he rescues her and then catches the helicopter, it is one of the it's just there's a few scenes in my life where I have to stop what I'm doing and focus entirely on that whenever it's on. I have to. And it's you're entirely right. It's one of the things that kind of ties the whole film together. It's that scene and that whole thing, the whole montage of him rescuing people, rescuing the cat out of the tree, helping the plane with Air Force One, another great moment, just fly. That another great line delivery as well. Don't ask. But lots of great stuff like that. But yeah, that whole opening montage, bad vibrations, right? I even got it. I pulled it for you.
Bad vibrations?
I mean, just that delivery is just
Yeah.
wonderful. So
Reeve just sells even the corniness of it. I think it's great. Just
yeah.
Jonny, I want to ask you, but just with the helicopter sequence, a memory that I have is showing my now 23-year-old son the movie for the first time. I remember he was maybe 5 or 6, old enough that I could hold him, and I was watching in our old apartment. We were watching that scene, and I was holding him, and he was really involved, watching Superman save Lois. When that helicopter falls, and again, he was just watching it wide-eyed, and Superman catches it, my son did a fist bump and said, "Got it." And I remember watching that scene with him, and I just started crying because it was like the magic that got to me has gotten to my kid. You know what I mean? And how is it that a movie that's 30 years old is still able to do that? There's something just inherently great about this movie that it's able to get those emotions, even out of a kid that's just watching it again in awe and wonder. Jonny, are there any moments like that in the movie that sell the movie for you, filmmaking wise?
Well, I think that's one of them. I will say this real quick because when I was younger, I never really noticed the models, or I never really noticed when there was a screen, when there wasn't, because it didn't really occur to me to look for that. I wasn't really into the filmmaking yet. I really wasn't that involved in that kind of stuff. So to me, it was just like, oh yeah, it looks like realistic sets and realistic places, and the helicopter looked real to me. And anyway, but now this time I was able to spot all those, like, oh, that's a model. Oh, that's that's fake. Oh, that's where this green screen is. That's
That's a miniature. Yeah.
And so that's what kind of made it feel campy. But I mean, it didn't bother me. Like, I wasn't kind of like, oh, this movie sucks. I wasn't saying that. I was like, I just was able to spot it now. I'm older. I can catch those things. I worked in film. I know how it works now. So I was able to go, oh, yep, there's a model. Oh, there's that. There's the matte painting, whatever. But it still worked, and they did a great job, and I still really appreciate everything about it as far as special effects go and all that stuff. But a certain scene, I don't know. I think I really just enjoy more of the acting moments with Gene Hackman and with Christopher Reeve. But as far as like the special effects and that's all fine and good. I mean, I have no qualms there. But I just really appreciate the acting that I get and the performances I get from Gene Hackman and from Christopher Reeve.
I would say to you too, I think one of the things as I've gotten older that I've really liked is model work, miniatures, and matte paintings. I cannot, every time I recognize or see a matte painting now, I'm like, God, that is gorgeous. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Just an artist actually physically created that.
Yeah.
And then Darin, I have some bad news for you. I'm glad you're sitting down. You said you'd watch this with your son, and you're impressed how a 30-year-old film could still have that kind of impact. It's been 46 years.
Well,
That's
a
right.
long time ago.
That's
But
right.
yeah, but obviously he wasn't, that was back when he was 6. So I don't know. I'm getting the math wrong, obviously. But yeah, this is
that's the stuff that just drives me as I get older. Like I'll say, well, the 80s, that was like 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. It's a long time ago. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, again, it's like you're right, Jonny. With the when you're a kid, you just buy into what's in front of you, right? And Chris, what you're saying, when you notice a matte painting or models, that's the magic of movies, and that's what I love. Even though you recognize it, I love that it's like, oh, that's a matte painting, but that's cool. There's actual effort that was put into that. Like, it works, and that's how movies are made. That's how the sauce is made, right? So yeah, all that is great. So just kind of to see your Chris, you mentioned something about the way that the montage of him after he becomes. I want to come back to that, but I do want to kind of seek into the patented segment, Scalzo's Score Corner, where you've done especially the last season on ScreenRun, where you take your kind of expertise in music and all your tastes, you're able to kind of put it all together as far as the music goes. What do you think, honestly and truly, of the John Williams score to this movie?
It's one of my favorites. I've just bought, I think, was it Rhino? Not Rhino. La La Land put out a really nice deluxe set on that a few years ago, and I picked that up, and it's the cleanest, clearest sounding version of it I've ever heard, with a whole bunch of like lost cues and stuff as well. It's fantastic. But John Williams' Superman score, the theme particularly, is one of the greatest, I think, themes in the history of cinema. And I also will say that the Planet Krypton piece is one of my favorite pieces of music ever. I pulled a clip of it, but I don't know if you would want to play it or not. It's like 10 seconds long.
Go for it.
But it's just, and one of the things that I always say, one of my favorite trailers and one of the most disappointing trailers of all time was the Superman Returns. That trailer is fantastic. The movie maybe not so much, but yeah, it's wonderful. It's one of my favorite scores. As a kid, I get chills whenever I would hear it. I will say I like what Hans Zimmer did with Man of Steel. I actually think that score is actually pretty damn good as well. I was really nervous going into that film, and I actually like what he did with it. But still, the Williams' score for this is just an all-time classic for sure.
Well, I don't know.
Captures the grandeur of the character perfectly.
It does. Again, it might tie in with because I think Pauline Kael even did a review where she was like, and the John Williams score is just going overboard, just trying to sell everything. And it's so pompous. And it's like, what? Because I don't know, the way that the score actually says Superman when the title comes up, the way that it's just instantly identifiable, the same way that Jaws is, or Raiders of the Lost Ark is, or Jurassic Park is.
The way the film opens with the kid doing the narration and just the subtlety of the strings and stuff as it just starts, as the curtain opens and we get to that model of the Daily Planet, the opening of the score of the film with the music for that too. That again, I'm 12 years old on my couch, like immediately as soon as that starts.
Yeah, and
sorry, I got all excited.
No, you're fine. Other than the Batman theme by Danny Elfman, or say the Rocketeer theme by James Horner, I really love that. I don't know if there's been another comic book movie theme, superhero theme, that sells it as hard as the Superman theme from John Williams. Johnny, what do you think of the music?
Yeah, I mean, it's so recognizable. I don't know how John Williams does it, man. Like, he just seems to get hit after hit, like with Star Wars and with Superman. And in fact, Darin, when it was all over, we tried to play that game where you hum Star Wars, then you try to hum Indiana Jones, then you try to hum Superman, and no one can do it. I know you can, but, right? They always go back to Star Wars. But yeah, John Williams, man, like he's just genius. I love his themes and what he's able to create. He's great.
Obviously, you have the Superman theme, you have the love theme between him and Lois, you have the Otis kind of the bumbling theme, that kind of, you have the Krypton theme. It just feels, I don't know, the music feels appropriate for what's being told, like the sweeping orchestral stuff during the Smallville scenes, especially when Clark and Martha have that scene where they say their goodbye, and just the way that the camera it soars, the camera's soaring, and the music's tying in with it. It's like there are so many moments that just the magic of movies is just captured in here. And again, it's, if you're trying to get the awe and wonder of a superhero movie, again, we're talking Donner just becoming part of the material, and I think it just really sells all of that. And I think that's hard to do. I know it's easier for people these days because comic book movies are getting more right than wrong, but as far as like comic book movies from this, I think this movie also set the standard, because how many movies follow this movie's structure? You know what I mean? Even RoboCop, I was telling my wife, even RoboCop, which is not a comic book movie, but it's a superhero movie through and through. It follows the same format. It shows the character before he becomes a superhero, when he becomes a superhero. You show him in a montage actually doing superhero stuff. Then you introduce him to the villain. You have the big climax where the villain or whatever, they fight, that kind of thing. So it seems like every movie after this has copied that structure and copied that format. So when people look at this movie and they're like, oh, Superman, it's so old hat, but it's like, yeah, but without Superman, you wouldn't have the comic book movies you have today. The structure of Captain America, the first Avenger, is the same thing. Like they subverted a little bit, but it's all the same kind of format. Batman Begins, which I love, which Nolan obviously modeled after this movie with the stars and everything like that. Same format. It takes a while for him to become Batman. When he dons it, you see him doing Batman stuff, and then he faces the villain and does the whole villain stuff. So I don't know, just waves have followed. It's just created waves in the comic movie feel today. Chris, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's because they just did such a great job of capturing kids' imagination and showing the of Superman on the big screen. It's a character that's been redone over and over and over again, and just the core message and of the character and how powerful it is, I think, and is just that's why I think it always succeeds. That's why we could talk about it in a bit. The Snyder stuff feels like such a failure to me. It's just because it misses the entire core of what the character is. But you're right, the impact of this film itself, and a lot of it is as a financial impact because it did pretty well, and
Yeah.
it made the whole genre viable. Basically, it's still we had a lot of stutters and stops for quite a while over the intervening kind of couple decades. But in fact, I don't think we did anything as much success until Batman '89, right? And because
Right.
because things had started to tank after that. And you have the failures of Superman 3 and particularly Superman 4, and the studios are kind of like, this is a dead genre. We can't do this anymore.
Yeah, all we got was Superman movies. Now we got was Batman movies
Yeah.
instead of just Wonder Woman movies, Green Lantern movies, just everything. And we're getting that now, but it took them a while. Jonny, do you feel the repercussions of this movie in the comic book movies of today, the ones that you've watched?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can definitely tell that this movie was the standard that everyone used, um, and I think it shows just in what you see in the other comic book movies. But yeah, I mean, it definitely started a trend.
Right.
I mean, Singer's soft reboot with Roth was to recapture all the magic of this.
Yeah.
Gunn is making his new Superman film again. Is trying to he just cast him as Tessmacher, so he's clearly trying to
Yeah.
recapture that magic again of this film that Donner was able to pull off. We'll
By
have
Right.
to
the way,
see if Corn
love that.
Sweat can pull off a Christopher Reeve, but
I
we'll see.
love when Gene Hackman yells Miss Tessmacher. I love that. Like that's like the best part of the movie for me. Whenever he says her name, it just cracks me up.
You know what blows my mind? In the TV version, he tries to kill her.
Yeah.
Oh,
He almost dumps her into a pit of lions or tigers, right?
Some kind of gigantic cats for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, and then Superman has to come in and save her, and they kind of give him a look. It's weird. Anyway,
it is odd.
so we've talked about Superman. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it's broke the ground. It's set the standard. So as far as the legacy of Superman after this, just briefly talking about the sequels, I just want to kind of give kind of a brief summary, and then we'll let each of you give your histories with that. I think it's just a thing of diminishing returns. We always look at, oh, this is successful. They miss the point of what's successful. The Salkinds, I think they have a great sense of what sells, but not a great sense of what keeps it going. And they're so funny because they're talking
Good
about
point.
Superman 3 and Supergirl. They're like, oh, it's not our fault that these movies are terrible. We still understand it. It's everybody else. It's like, you guys don't know what's how to manage anything. You know how to get the ball rolling, but that's it. But Superman 2, obviously, the stuff that works, it's funny watching that movie now. Hackman notoriously did not show up for reshoots. So anything you see in Superman 2 was not directed by Lester. It was directed by Richard Donner. So there's a different tone, it seems like. But the fact that Lester introduces his kind of hell's a poppin', hard day's night kind of humor, it pushes it further away from the gravitas that they started with the sequel. So you can definitely feel that, even though I think it's half of a good movie. And as a kid, I loved it because you get to see Superman punching things as opposed to just saving things. Now, as an adult, I'm more into this one because that's what I want to see. I want to see Superman being good and inspiring people. But uh, so there's the sequel, obviously, the Richard Donner cut, which you talked about. I don't think it works. It's an interesting what might have been. But
I
obviously
agree.
there's Johnny, I don't know if you've seen it. They use test footage of Kidder and Reeve where it's obviously they're just not actual on set. They're just trying it out. It's they're doing the screen tests and everything. You have
This
the
is
bat.
pre him bulked up too, so it's
Yeah,
really funny to see him. He's a lot thinner.
it obviously doesn't match. So I'm sorry, it doesn't feel like a movie to me. It's just an experiment. Superman 2, the Lester cut, is a movie. I'm not overly enthusiastic about a lot of stuff. I'm not overly enthusiastic about the cellophane S that Superman is able to pull off his chest and throw at a bad guy, that kind of thing. But it was a success still, not as big as the first one. When you do Superman 3, which is totally not touched by Donner whatsoever, it's obvious what's missing. The missing ingredient has been Donner, because even though Reeve I think is good, he's not even a main character of that movie. It's Richard Pryor that's the main character of that movie.
Yeah.
And the thing that I will say about Superman 3 is it still gets the idea of what Superman is. When he becomes evil, he doesn't start murdering people. He just becomes a dick. You know what I mean? He's like blowing out the Olympic torch. He's straightening the leaning tower of Pisa, that kind of stuff. He's just being a dick and a jerk. That's his version of evil, right? And then Superman 4, I think, has a very sincere. They went from a sincere place. Like Reeve wanted to make a movie that was sincere. He wanted to make a movie about Superman trying to involve himself in stuff that doesn't really call for it. I like even, and again, the filmmaking is so horrible because they kept cutting back on that budget that it's an embarrassment. But I think the sincerity is still there, especially with the trying to save the planet. And it's literally played out with them saving the Daily Planet, like from being sold, that kind of thing. So, and then there's obviously Superman Returns. I want to see into that. But as far as the main sequels, Chris, what was your experience with those?
Oh yeah, sure. So I've loved Superman too, but again, that's me as a kid, right? And I think it may have been the first Superman film I saw in the theater as well.
Hmm.
And just having Zod and the three of them it was nice seeing Superman actually have competition, people who could actually put up a fight with him.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of just, like the big issue with Superman Returns is, oh look, he's lifting heavy things again.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I still have I have no I have my issues with Lester Superman 2, but as a kid, the nostalgia factor, I give that film a big pass. Superman 3 is, I think, was scary for me too as well, and that I can't remember her name now. That woman gets kind of assumed by the computer
Yeah.
and stuff. That was pretty terrifying for me as a kid. And it was fun to see him go back to Kansas, but as a whole, it's just not that successful. And Superman 4, again, it's a travesty what happened to that film.
Yeah.
I really wish that there was a documentary. I would watch the hell out of that on the making of that film and what happened and what could have been.
Yeah.
Or maybe even like an animated version of the script, like the original version of the movie. I would love to see like an animated version of that film and see
Right.
how it should have been. It really is. That was one of the big disappointments for me because everything I've read about it, I feel like it could have been actually pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And just failed.
You can see the parts working, obviously. So, Johnny, what about you in the sequels?
Well, the only ones I'm really familiar with are 1 and 2. 3 and 4, I haven't seen maybe just once each. And I remember Richard Pryor being in the third one. And the only thing I know about the fourth one is John Cryer's in it. I
Yeah.
don't remember like what
I
it's.
can't stand John Cryer. I can't stand John Cryer as an actor. I'm
But
sure he's
I
a
do
wonderful
like
guy, but
I do like the second one. The second one with Zod and with Ursa and what's the other guy's name?
None.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like that. I appreciate they've actually has, antagonists to fight. So that was fun for me. I did not like how the beginning of the movie just basically recapped the first movie because we're too dumb to know what happened in the first one. That bugged me. I was like, I don't need this recap. I know what happened.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I like the second one probably the best out of the sequels.
Right. Chris, I don't know if you know this. Our first episode too, Johnny, one of the basis for forming NostalgiaCast is in 2006 they had Cars and they had Superman Returns, which is when I really started noticing nostalgia factors and what that meant. Superman Returns is the ultimate nostalgia movie because it tries to lean back on the Donner kind of sensibility. I think it's straitjacketed though as a movie because it's trying so hard to be reverent to those movies that it doesn't have a life all its own. Like Ralph is great, and we see him later on the TV shows, but it just seems like he's trying to do a Christopher Reeve performance, and it doesn't really give me insight into who he is. that kind of thing. And it's, again, it's a 2.5 hour movie about, Luthor again doing the real estate stuff, and nothing really gets resolved. The characters end in the same place they kind of begin, just with Superman kind of sticking around. So I admire, and watching it in the theater, I don't think I'd ever experienced John Williams' Superman theme on a big booming Dolby surround system like that. So that was like, but again, you watch it and you're like, oh, this is great, and then you just loses you after a while, because you're like, oh, all it is nostalgia. They're not really doing anything new to add to the mystique or the mythos. They're just kind of doing the same thing. I don't know. What do you think about Superman Returns?
I agree with you entirely. They're too focused on trying to honor the past that they were even repeat the same mistakes of the first film in some occasions. But it's worth, I shouldn't say it's worth watching for. I would watch just the plane rescue.
Yeah.
I think that Singer nails that, and is one of my it's one of my favorite kind of Superman scenes. Is that plane rescue? He's able to recapture the magic for that like 8 minute sequence. The score, John Ottman's score for that, which borrows heavily from Williams, works as well. When the plane kind of crushes in on itself from the pressure of him, kind of, all that he rips off the doors, flies in, sees Lois. I'm like, that's my Christopher Reeve Superman. I think that in that moment, but the rest of the film just doesn't work at all. And it's really just too bad.
Johnny, have you seen Superman Returns?
I have seen it. I saw it in the theater when it came out. But I will say it's not very memorable for me. I don't remember much about it. I only saw it the one time.
And is that because it's not getting a personality of its own, that it just doesn't stick with you? I mean, do you think that's, we talk about nostalgia all the time and what that means and how people try to use it, 20, 30, 46 years after the fact. I mean, do you think that's a factor and why you don't remember it?
I mean, if he's trying to copy Christopher Reeve and they're trying just to, borrow from the first movie, then that's definitely a reason why.
Yeah. So it's a worthy try, I think. And I like that over some of the later stuff that we get. We talked about Cable a little bit. The reason that those movies don't work for me is it's trying to subvert our idea of what Superman is. It doesn't start from for me, it doesn't build from the ground up. For me, Man of Steel starts from a place where I'm expected to know certain things about Superman in order for me to engage with the story that's being told. But I don't know who this Superman is by the end. Like, what does he stand for? There's notoriously the part where he breaks Zod's neck, which, number one, it's treated as this big deal, but they never deal with that, about his no kill rule, I guess, in the movie. So the fact that they treated it as such a big moment, to me, it's like, well, they didn't really, in the comics they deal with it, but as far as this character goes, I don't know what he feels about killing. Like, they don't really cover that. And then it just cuts automatically to the next scene where he's all smiles, which it just makes it seem like Superman is happiest after he's killed people. I don't know.
Yeah, I think supposedly that was supposed to be the impetus for his never kill rule, is that having actually done it, he's now lived the horror of taking someone's life, so he won't never do it again.
Yeah.
But you're right. And I think just what Snyder was trying to do with that whole universe, you may have been able to pull it off if you kept Superman straight. If you did him the way he's supposed to be, instead of he's not supposed to be tortured. That's the whole thing. He is not supposed to be a tortured character. And I mean, I get I know we get the whole Christ-like mythos. That's kind of a running theme through a lot of the films.
Yeah.
But Snyder, again, the man does not understand or appreciate subtlety in any capacity. So that's one of the big issues. The idea of how would Earth actually react to an alien who had the power to destroy us? How would we actually react to that? It's an interesting idea. But again, he's too ham-fisted and he's too pessimistic, I think, on too much stuff to handle it properly. And I think Cable has his moments. When he's talking to Zod about, he says, well, I can't remember the exact line now, but he basically replicates the line from Superman 2 where he says, like, General, would you like to step outside? And that's why I think that he could have pulled it off if he had been given the proper material, but he never got it. Snyder's view of Superman it's mistaken. It's wrong. And it doesn't understand the core of who that character is.
Yeah. And again, for me, there's no starting ground. It just starts from the place of subversion, which is like, why you can't start from that place. You have to have something to subvert. And I don't know, my brain just can't work like that. I can't just walk in and accept that there's already been an established, because it's not a sequel, right? Jonny, what's your experience with that, with the DCEU and like the Zack Snyder version of Superman? Do you have any thoughts?
I don't know. I kind of removed myself from it when those movies came out. I watched them, but I didn't let anything kind of affect me. I was just I was just there just to enjoy the ride. I didn't really care much about it. I didn't really like have any really strong opinions about it. But yeah, it was just kind of like, that was that. You know?
Well, it says something that in the beginning of Superman 78, the first time Superman shows up, you see him rescue a woman and then snatch a helicopter out of the air and bring it safely up. And you get the shots of people just applauding, just wowed, versus Man of Steel, where he shows up and he destroys an entire town. I don't know. There's just there's a difference in the way that the characters are presented. Why there's a Superman, and we're getting into subjectivity because what is supposed to be mean, right? Everybody has a different idea. I fundamentally disagree with the Snyder versions because they come from a place of, why are people fearing Superman instead of cheering for him and thinking of him as a savior? I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on that, Chris, about how the differences in there portrayed from one movie to the other?
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that I think they wanted to course correct, because again, Superman Returns was just no real action. Nothing ever really happens, right? A couple rescues, he lifts up the big planet, whatever the case may be, and then that's it. The kryptonite block planet globe thing.
Yeah.
So they're like, all right, we need more action. We need more stuff here. And thus let's bring in Zod now. Let's bring in everybody in now instead. So then we got to up the violence as well.
Yeah.
And I said they overcorrected for that entirely. And I think you didn't need to have that much. So, but yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you're saying with that.
I remember not liking those Zod fight sequences and like just destroying the whole city. I remember thinking that was like way overdone, way over. I was like, what is this? What are we doing here?
Though I will say, I do like Ben Affleck as Batman. I did enjoy that.
Wow.
I actually thought he did a good job.
Well, that's a topic for a different movie. We're gonna have to bring it back anyway. But yeah, I've really appreciated this, Chris. It's like you've gone above and beyond what I thought you'd be able to bring to this conversation. That's a big reason why I think First Run is such a great podcast. And then your banter with the Lady Wand, the way you guys come off as brother and sister, you can needle at each other, but there's a respect. Again, it's like Superman and Lois Lane in Superman 70. There's a respect, but there's also kind of a love there, and you know each other, likes and dislikes and things like that. And it's a pleasure listening to you guys talk. It's a pleasure listening to you and Matt talk. You've got the goods. I think you're able to talk about Ferrari with Michael Mann. You're able to talk about Mission Impossible, which I tweeted that I just listened to the episode on that. You're able to talk about May, December, all the new movies. You're able to talk. And again, I listened to like I said, what was it? What was the most recent? It was The Flash. I listened to that episode that you guys did because I was interested in your take on the DCEU, that kind of thing. You're able to take any of these and you know your stuff, and you can definitely tell that from listening to the First Run. I really want you to know that. I also, when Lady Wand was on, I asked her where you were from, and you said you're from Connecticut, because the first few times I listened to ScreenRun, you sound almost exactly like my uncle, who I adore. And so I was just in awe of your voice from the very beginning that I started. I'm like, he sounds like my uncle. I don't know what this is. I'm having a great time just listening to him talk. So yeah, just you being able to bring that expertise and all your 4K knowledge, your physical media knowledge, and your obviously being there for Superman when it first came out and everything, that we really appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate it. Would you say
doesn't it give you kind of a shudder of electricity through you to be in the same room with me?
Is that you would say, do you shudder electricity being in the same Zoom room with me?
Zoom room? Yes, definitely. Jonny, what do you think? You get that same kind of
I feel it. It's very electric.
Well, gentlemen, I had a lot of fun speaking with you today. I really appreciate the invite. It's nice to get out and just show up and be able to talk to other people and not have to do the amount of prep and other stuff that I have to do for my other shows. Especially I'm talking about a film that I've seen, I don't know how many times, Sweet Pete. But absolutely, it's been an honor for me, and it's been a blast. So thank you so much for the invite, and I hope to see you come back again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely on our list. And again, just like being able to overcome the flaws we have of Superman, just being able to overcome our disagreements about David Bowie, it's great that we
can
can
I
be here
say
and be
this?
friends.
Let me say this real quick. Hey, I really like the Under Pressure with Queen and David Bowie. So
Okay.
yeah, that's one
Queen
of my.
is probably my favorite band as
Yeah.
well
Oh, okay.
of all time. I'm a massive Queen fan. So
We've talked about Queen on NostalgiaCast, and yeah, it's definitely my
right.
favorite band as well. So we've talked in depth.
I have your Flash
We were
Gordon
talking about-
episode queued up next.
Okay.
Just because of that. So yes.
Well, Johnny was a lot more respectful to Queen than he was to David Bowie. I'll just say that.
Well, that's good.
So
That's
we'll
true.
be okay. All right. So Chris, tell us how people can find you on Twitter, on just your podcast. Just tell us about you and how people can become fans of you.
Yeah, so the regular show, I guess, the first run, just thefirstrun.com. You can head out there. We have archives of all our old shows, going back to like the first one when the sound quality is absolute crap. It's a lot of fun. But as well as we have our report card because we give everything a grade. We have a little player there you can start right away, and then ScreenRun is available at screenrun.fun, and every show is available on all your podcasting platforms. So I do love the open kind of democracy of podcasting that you can pretty much find stuff everywhere. So I think that's fantastic. But that's that. And my Twitter account is what CG Scalzo, I think is what it is.
Mhm.
And then at the first run as well. And then I think at ScreenRun are both on there as well. So yeah, that's that, I guess. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Look forward to hearing that new season of ScreenRun, getting back into basics with Lady Wan. Say hi to her for us.
Will
Yeah.
do.
All right. This has been a really super conversation. Chris Scalzo, thank you for joining us. Johnny, this has been another great episode of NostalgiaCast. I'm Darin Lundberg.
And I'm Johnny Craddock.
And you'll believe podcasters can podcast.
Miss Tessmacher!
All right.